The baby wouldn't stop screaming. I pressed my palm against the diner's stainless steel counter, watching the man in the tailored black suit struggle with the infant carrier like it was a live grenade. 3 a.m. Customers were usually truckers or insomniacs, not men who looked like they'd walked off a cologne advertisement and into my fluorescent-lit corner of Philadelphia. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face carved from something harder than marble. His jaw worked as the baby's cries escalated, tiny fists punching air. "You need help?" I asked, grabbing the coffee pot even though his cup sat untouched. His eyes cut to me gray, cold, absolutely exhausted. "She won't stop." "She?" I moved around the counter before I could think better of it. The rational part of my brain noted the expensive watch, the way his shoulders filled that suit jacket, the complete absence of a wedding ring. The maternal part just heard a baby in distress. "May I?" He stepped back like I'd offered to defuse a bomb. I lifted the carrier, and the weight of her maybe 3 months old, dark hair plastered to her scalp with sweat, hit me somewhere deep in my chest. She was red-faced, hysterical, wearing a onesie that probably cost more than my rent. I lifted her out, supporting her head, bringing her against my shoulder. Her little body was rigid with fury. "Hey, sweetheart," I murmured, swaying slightly. "Hey, you're okay." The crying didn't stop, but it changed pitch. I kept swaying, kept murmuring nonsense, the same things I'd said to my sister's kids, the same rhythm that lived somewhere in my bones. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and pie, and her tiny fingers found my hair, gripping. Then, slowly, the crying ebbed. Hiccups, whimpers, silence. The man stared at me like I'd performed a miracle. "How long has she been crying?" I asked, still swaying. 4 hours. His voice was rough, scraped raw. "Since I picked her up." "Picked her up?" I looked down at the baby, now slack against my shoulder, breathing evening out. "Where's her mother?" "Dead." The word dropped between us like a stone. 3 days ago. Car accident. My stomach hollowed. "I'm so sorry." He didn't respond, just watched the baby, his daughter. I assumed like he'd never seen anything so terrifying and precious at once. "She probably needs a bottle," I said. "And a clean diaper. When did she last eat?" "I don't know." He dragged a hand down his face. I don't know anything about babies." Something twisted in my chest. He looked lost in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour, and everything to do with the tiny human now sleeping against me. "Sit," I told him, nodding toward a booth. "I'll make her a bottle if you have formula." He moved like a man underwater, sliding into the booth and pulling a diaper bag from the carrier designer. Leather, completely at odds with the chaos inside it. I found formula, bottles, and what looked like someone's hasty attempt at packing baby supplies. 10 minutes later, the baby I still didn't know her name was drinking slowly, her gray eyes fixed on my face. The man sat across from me, elbows on the table, watching with an intensity that prickled across my skin. "What's her name?" I asked. "Lucia." He said it softly, like the word hurt. "After her mother." "She's beautiful." "She's my brother's." He leaned back, and something in his posture shifted, became harder, more guarded. "Was my brother's. He died 2 months ago. Lucia's mother didn't tell anyone she was pregnant until last week. Then the accident. The pieces weren't fitting right." "So you're her uncle?" "Guardian, as of yesterday afternoon." His jaw worked. "I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I should have stayed quiet. Should have handed Lucia back, refilled his coffee, returned to my side of the counter. But something about the way he looked at her like she was a debt he'd die paying kept me there. "You'll figure it out," I said. "Babies are more resilient than you think." "Are they?" His eyes met mine again, and this time I saw something beneath the exhaustion, something dangerous and sad and entirely too knowing. "You have children?" "No, just nieces and nephews." I adjusted Lucia as she finished the bottle, lifting her to burp against my shoulder. "I'm Sienna, by the way. Dante." He didn't offer a last name. The bell above the diner door chimed. 2 men walked in suits like Dante's, but cheaper. They spotted him immediately, and something shifted in the air, the kind of shift that made prey animals freeze. Dante's whole body went rigid. "Stay here," he told me, voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "Don't move." He stood, buttoning his jacket with precise movements, and walked toward the men. They met halfway, and I watched as words were exchanged too low for me to hear, but sharp enough to cut. One of the men glanced past Dante, straight at me and Lucia, My arms tightened around the baby instinctively. Dante said something that made both men go still. Then he turned and walked back, collected the diaper bag, and reached for Lucia. "Thank you," he said, taking her with careful hands. She stirred but didn't wake. "For everything, Dante. You should forget I was here." His gray eyes held mine, and there was a warning in them I didn't understand. "Forget her. Forget tonight." He left $40 on the table for a coffee he never drank, and walked out with Lucia tucked against his chest. The two men followed. I watched through the window as they climbed into separate black SUVs, Dante and Lucia in one, the men in another. The vehicles pulled away in perfect synchronization. My hands were shaking as I cleared his table. Under the $40, pressed against the laminate, was a business card. Heavy stock, no name, just a phone number and an address in Society Hill, the kind of neighborhood where old money and new crime shook hands in the dark. I should have thrown it away. I didn't. 3 days passed before I stopped thinking about Lucia's tiny fingers in my hair. 5 days before I stopped jumping every time a black SUV rolled past the diner. A week before, I admitted to myself that I'd memorized the number on that business card. I worked the graveyard shift because it paid extra, and because my apartment, a studio in Fishtown with walls thin enough to hear my neighbor's television, needed every extra dollar. My life was small by design. After growing up in foster care, I'd learned that wanting less meant hurting less when it all disappeared, but something about that night had crawled under my skin. I kept replaying the way Dante had held Lucia like she was made of glass and grenades, the way those men had looked at me, the warning in his voice when he told me to forget. You didn't tell someone to forget unless there was something to remember. "You're doing it again," Marie said, sliding past me with 2 plates of eggs. She'd been working at Rosie's diner for 15 years and had the kind of radar that caught every distraction. "Doing what?" "Staring into space like you saw a ghost." She set the plates down at table 4. "Or a man. I didn't see anything." "Uh-huh." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe a word. "Well, whatever nothing you saw, shake it off. We got a rush coming." She was right. The morning crowd hit like clockwork. Construction workers, nurses coming off shift, students cramming before 8 a.m., classes. I poured coffee, flipped eggs, smiled until my face hurt. It wasn't until 10 a.m., when the crowd thinned, that I saw him again. Not Dante. One of the men from that night. He sat at the counter, ordered black coffee, and didn't touch it. Just watched me with eyes that tracked every movement. When I brought him the check, he left a 50 and walked out without waiting for change. Under the bill was a folded piece of paper. "Mr. Accardi would like to see you. The address you have. Tonight, 8 p.m. My heart kicked against my ribs. I should have torn it up. Should have called who? The police? And told them what? Instead, I pocketed the note and finished my shift with hands that wouldn't stay steady. Society Hill looked different at night. Old brick townhouses, glowing with warm light. Tree-lined streets that whispered money so old it didn't bother announcing itself. The address led me to a 4-story brownstone with black shutters and a door that probably cost more than my car. I almost turned around twice, but I thought about Lucia's crying and the exhaustion in Dante's eyes and the way he'd looked at me like I'd done something impossible. I knocked. The door opened immediately. A woman in her 50s, elegant in a way that suggested she'd been beautiful once and didn't care anymore, looked me up and down. "Sienna?" "Yes. He's expecting you." She stepped aside, and I entered a world I'd only seen in movies. Marble floors, a curved staircase, art that looked original. Everything smelled like leather and old wood and money. She led me through the house to a study on the 2nd floor, knocked twice, then disappeared. "Come in." Dante's voice hit me before I saw him. I pushed the door open. He stood by the window, Lucia asleep in a bassinet beside him. He'd traded the suit for dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked less exhausted but no less dangerous. "You came," he said. "You didn't give me much choice." I stayed by the door. "Your friend made it sound like an order. It was a request." He turned fully, and I saw the tension in his shoulders. "I need your help." "With what?" "Her." He nodded toward Lucia. "She won't stop crying. Hasn't slept more than an hour at a time since that night. My housekeeper tried. I hired a night nurse. Nothing works. So you tracked me down? You're the only person who's made her stop." His jaw worked. "I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Just help me keep her alive." The bluntness of it struck somewhere tender. "You're her uncle. She's not going to die because she cries. You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched something move across his face. Calculation, maybe, or resignation. My brother was killed, he said finally. Murdered. The car accident that killed Lucia's mother? It wasn't an accident. Someone is trying to erase my brother's legacy, and Lucia is the last piece. The air left my lungs. What? I'm telling you this, because if you walk out that door, you're walking into danger anyway. His eyes held mine. That night at the diner? You were seen with her. You're already part of this, whether you want to be or not. That's insane. But my voice shook. I'm a waitress. I held a baby. That's it. In my world, that's enough. He moved closer, and I caught the scent of him, something dark and expensive. I can protect you, but only if you stay close. Stay close. I repeated the words like they might make sense. What does that mean? Move in, help with Lucia. Let me keep you both safe while I find who killed my brother. You're asking me to live here? With you. I'm asking you to save her life. His voice dropped. And possibly your own. Lucia stirred in the bassinet, whimpering. Without thinking, I moved toward her, and Dante stepped back. I lifted her carefully, and she settled against me like I was gravity. Why me? I whispered. Because she chose you, Dante said. And in my experience, babies know things we don't. I looked down at Lucia, at her perfect sleeping face, and thought about my empty studio apartment, about the life I'd built out of nothing and kept small enough to protect. Then I thought about tiny fingers gripping my hair. 1 week, I heard myself say. Trial basis. If this is as crazy as it sounds, I'm gone. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Relief, maybe, or something darker. 1 week, he agreed. I didn't know then that I'd just signed away every safe thing I'd ever built. The room Dante gave me was twice the size of my apartment and filled with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. A 4-poster bed, a wardrobe with carved details, a window overlooking a garden I could barely see in the darkness. The bathroom's through there, Dante said, standing in the doorway with Lucia sleeping against his shoulder. He'd insisted on carrying her up, and she'd gone willingly, small progress. Towels are stocked. If you need anything, press the intercom. This is temporary, I reminded him. And myself. Of course. But the way he said it suggested he didn't believe me any more than I did. He transferred Lucia to the bassinet he'd had moved into my room close enough for her to sense me, he'd explained, but separate enough for boundaries. She stirred but didn't wake. She'll be up in 3 hours, Dante said. Maybe less. I know. He lingered, and in the low light from the hallway, I could see the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way exhaustion had carved lines around his eyes. Thank you, he said quietly, for coming. You didn't leave me much choice. There's always a choice. His gaze held mine. You chose her. Before I could respond, he left, closing the door softly behind him. I sat on the edge of the bed, too soft, too expensive, and tried to process what I'd done. 24 hours ago, I'd been slinging coffee and collecting tips. Now I was living in a brownstone with a man who'd essentially admitted he was involved in something dangerous enough to get people killed. Lucia made a small sound, and I moved to the bassinet instinctively. She was still asleep, one tiny fist pressed against her cheek. I touched her hand gently, and her fingers curled around mine. What did I get us into? I whispered. She didn't answer, just held on. The first night was brutal. Lucia woke every 2 hours like clockwork, screaming with a fury that seemed impossible for something so small. Each time, I lifted her, swayed, murmured, and eventually she'd settle. But the moment I tried to put her down, the crying would start again. By 4 a.m., I was standing in the darkened hallway, rocking Lucia and seriously questioning my life choices, when Dante appeared. He wore dark sweatpants and nothing else, and I tried very hard not to notice the way the hallway light caught the lines of muscle across his chest and stomach. You should be sleeping, I said. So should you. He moved closer, studying Lucia's face. She's worse tonight. She's grieving. The words came out before I could stop them. Babies feel loss. She knows something's wrong. Dante's expression shifted, something raw and painful, crossing his features. My brother would have been a good father. What was he like? Carlo? A ghost of a smile. Reckless. Brilliant. He could talk his way into or out of anything. Our father groomed me to take over the family business, but Carlo was supposed to be free. What business? Dante met my eyes, and I saw him weighing what to tell me. Import-export. Mostly legitimate, some less so, the kind of business that makes enemies. Mafia, I said flatly. That's a movie word. But he didn't deny it. We're a family with interests. Some people don't like our interests. And someone killed your brother because of it. Yes. The word was granite. And they would have killed Lucia too if I hadn't gotten to her first. My arms tightened around the baby. Who? That's what I'm trying to find out. He reached out, touching Lucia's dark hair with surprising gentleness. She has his eyes. Carlo's. Did you notice? I looked down. Even in sleep, Lucia's features held something refined, almost aristocratic. She's beautiful. She's a target. His hand dropped away. As long as she's alive, she's a threat to whoever wants my brother's legacy erased. What legacy? She's a baby. She's an Accardi. The way he said it made it sound like a curse and a crown. That name carries weight. History. Blood. Some people would rather see all of that buried than let it pass to her. The hallway suddenly felt colder. You're telling me someone wants a baby dead because of her last name? Welcome to my world. His voice was bitter. Still want to stay? I should have said no. Should have handed Lucia over and walked out into the night. But when I looked down at her sleeping face so innocent, so completely unaware of the danger surrounding her, I couldn't. 1 week, I said. Then we reassess. Something flickered in Dante's eyes. 1 week. He started to turn away, then stopped. Sienna? Yes. If anyone asks, you're Lucia's nanny. Nothing more. The less connected you appear to this family, the safer you are. Got it. He disappeared down the hallway, and I returned to my room with Lucia, and the growing certainty that I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Morning came with pale light through unfamiliar windows. Lucia woke me at 6, hungry and furious, and I stumbled through making a bottle in the kitchen, all marble counters and appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, appeared with coffee that tasted like heaven, and a knowing look that suggested she'd seen this all before. Mr. Accardi is in the gym, she said. He asked that you join him for breakfast at 8. I glanced at Lucia, who was working through her bottle with single-minded determination. I'll try. 8 o'clock found me in a dining room that could have seated 20, with Lucia dozing in her carrier and Dante across from me in a fresh suit. He looked like he'd slept 8 hours and had a team of stylists. I looked like I'd been hit by a truck. You didn't have to dress up, he said, and I caught the ghost of amusement in his voice. I didn't have time to unpack my ball gown. I took a long drink of coffee. What's the plan for today? I have meetings until 3. Mrs. Chen will help with anything you need. He cut into an omelet with precise movements. Tomorrow, I'm having a DNA test done. I froze. What? Lucia's DNA. To confirm paternity. You said she was your brother's. Her mother said she was my brother's. His gray eyes were unreadable. But I need to be certain. For legal reasons. For her safety. For everything. And if she's not? The question felt dangerous. Then I find out who she is and protect her anyway. He said it like it was simple. She's already in danger. Her parentage doesn't change that. I looked at Lucia, sleeping peacefully, and felt something shift in my chest. When will you get results? 3 days. Maybe 4. He set down his fork. Until then, we proceed as planned. What plan? You haven't actually told me what you're trying to do. Find my brother's killer, protect Lucia, keep you alive. He stood, buttoning his jacket. In that order. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort you, Sienna. I'm here to keep you breathing. He moved toward the door, then paused. There's a panic button in every room, red button by the light switches. You press it, and 6 men arrive in under 3 minutes. 6 men? Security. They're outside. You won't see them unless you need to. His eyes held mine. But they're always there. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with a sleeping baby and the creeping realization that I'd moved into a fortress disguised as a home. The house breathed around me, old wood settling, distant footsteps, the hum of expensive appliances. I spent the first full day learning its rhythms, while Lucia cycled through crying, eating, and brief periods of sleep. Mrs. Chen moved through the spaces like a ghost, appearing with food or fresh towels or a murmured warning that Mr. Accardi prefers the curtains closed in the evening. I asked why. So no one can see in, she replied, as if it were obvious. By the second day, I'd noticed the cameras. Small, discreet, positioned in corners and doorways. Not in my room or the bathroom, Dante apparently had some boundaries, but everywhere else. Who watches these? I asked him that evening, when he returned from wherever he'd been all day. Security team. They're looking for threats, not monitoring you. He loosened his tie, and I tried not to notice the way the motion drew attention to his throat. Why? Planning something? Just wondering how much privacy I actually have. In this house? Very little. He moved to pour himself a drink from a crystal decanter. But that's the trade-off for safety. Your life sounds exhausting. It is. He took a slow sip, and something in his expression softened slightly. How is she? I glanced at Lucia, who was finally sleeping in her carrier after 2 hours of fighting it. Better. She's starting to recognize me, I think. The crying is less intense. You're good with her. I just pay attention. I busied myself with folding a blanket. Most babies just want to feel safe. Don't we all? The words were quiet enough that I almost missed them. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his whole demeanor shifted, shoulders straightening, jaw tightening. I need to take this. He disappeared into his study, and I was left alone with Lucia and the growing sense that the walls were full of secrets I didn't know how to decode. The DNA test happened on the 3rd day. A doctor arrived at noon, professional, efficient, completely unremarkable except for the way Dante escorted him personally to and from his car. The cheek swab took 30 seconds. Lucia didn't even wake up. Results in 72 hours, the doctor said. Dante handed him an envelope cash. I assumed and closed the door with a finality that felt like a countdown starting. What happens if she's not Carlos? I asked when the doctor was gone. Dante was quiet for a long moment, standing by the window with his hands in his pockets. Then someone lied. And I need to find out why. Could she be yours? The question hung between us like smoke. Dante turned slowly, and there was something dangerous in his eyes. No. How can you be sure? Because I would know. His voice was ice. And because I'm careful about things like that. I should have dropped it. But something about the way he held himself rigid, defensive, made me push. But you said your brother was reckless. Carlo was reckless with his life, not with women. Dante moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. If Lucia isn't his, then someone planted her in our lives for a reason, and that reason is probably worse than anything we've imagined. The implication settled like cold water in my stomach. You think she's a trap. I think she's a mystery. His eyes searched mine. But I also think whoever she is, she's innocent, and that's enough. Before I could respond, his phone rang again. This time, when he looked at the screen, all the blood drained from his face. What? I asked. They found the car. He was already moving, grabbing his jacket. The one that killed Lucia's mother. And it was registered to a shell company, one of ours. He met my eyes, and I saw genuine fear there for the first time. Someone inside the family killed her. Dante left immediately, taking 2 security guards with him. Mrs. Chen appeared to tell me the house was now in lockdown protocol, which meant no one in or out without authorization, panic buttons armed, and every curtain drawn. I spent the afternoon trapped in luxury, pacing with Lucia, and trying not to imagine what Dante was discovering. When he returned after dark, he looked like he'd aged a decade. Tell me, I said. He poured a drink, downed it, poured another. The car was reported stolen 3 days before the accident. Convenient. But you don't believe it. I believe someone wanted us to find that car. Wanted us to know it was family. He turned to face me. This isn't about money or territory. This is personal. Who would? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him. Carlo and I had enemies, but we also had family. Cousins, uncles, associates who've been loyal for decades. If someone inside is cleaning house, I can't trust anyone. The weight of that landed on me like a stone. Except me. Except you. He said it softly. You're the only person in this house who has no reason to betray me. Yet, I added. I have no reason yet. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Refreshingly honest. Lucia stirred in her carrier, and I lifted her before she could start crying. She settled against me immediately, and I caught Dante watching with an expression I couldn't decipher. What? I asked. You're natural with her, like you've done this before. I haven't. Not like this. I adjusted Lucia's weight. I just remember what it felt like to need someone and have no one show up. The vulnerability in my own words surprised me. Dante's expression shifted, something softer breaking through the ice. Foster care? He asked. How did you... I had you investigated before I sent for you." At my sharp look, he shrugged. "Standard procedure. I needed to know who I was bringing into my home." "Of course you did." I shouldn't have felt betrayed, but something stung anyway. "What else did your investigation tell you?" "That you've been on your own since you were 18. That you work 60 hours a week and save every penny. That you have a sister somewhere in New Mexico you haven't spoken to in 3 years." He paused. "That you're exactly what you appear to be, someone trying to survive." "Well, that's comforting. I'm predictable. You're honest." He moved closer, and Lucia made a small sound between us. In my world, that's rare enough to be valuable. We stood there in the dim light of the living room, separated by a sleeping baby and everything else. I wanted to ask what happened next, wanted to demand more answers, but exhaustion was creeping in, and Lucia was finally peaceful. "You should rest," Dante said quietly. "Tomorrow might be complicated." "Why? What's tomorrow?" His jaw tightened. "Family dinner. My uncle is demanding to meet Lucia." "And that's bad?" "That depends," he said, "on whether he's the one trying to kill us." The morning of the family dinner, Dante was different. Colder, more controlled. He appeared in my room at 7 a.m. Already dressed in a black suit that looked like armor. "You need proper clothes," he said without preamble. I was in my usual jeans and sweater, rocking Lucia, who'd been up since 5. "Excuse me? For tonight, my uncle is old-fashioned. You're Lucia's nanny, which means you'll be present but not participating." He pulled out his phone. "I'm having a stylist come at noon." "I don't need a stylist. This isn't optional." His voice was flat. "You represent this household now. That comes with expectations." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him exactly where he could shove his expectations, but Lucia chose that moment to spit up on my shoulder, and Dante's expression flickered with something that might have been amusement before the ice returned. "Noon," he repeated. "Don't fight her on the dress. You'll lose." The stylist, Margot, sleek and French and utterly terrifying, arrived with enough clothes to outfit a small country. She took one look at me, said something in French that sounded insulting, and got to work. An hour later, I stood in front of a full-length mirror and barely recognized myself. The dress was midnight blue, simple but elegant, hitting just below my knees. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that would draw too much attention, but the cut, the fabric, the way it moved, everything screamed money I didn't have. "Better," Margot declared. "You'll do." "Gee, thanks." She handed me a pair of low heels and a stern warning about posture, then disappeared as quickly as she'd come. I was still staring at my reflection when Dante knocked. "Come in." He entered, stopped, and something crossed his face too quickly for me to catch. "Does it work?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "It works." His voice was rougher than usual. "You look appropriate." High praise. Sienna. He moved closer, and I caught that dark, expensive scent again. "Tonight will be difficult. My uncle is not a kind man. He'll test you, try to find weaknesses. Whatever he says, whatever he implies about Lucia or me or this situation, don't react. What exactly am I supposed to do? Be invisible. Hold Lucia. Stay close to me." His gray eyes held mine. "And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you use the signal." "What signal?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device looked like a car key fob. "Press the button twice. Security responds immediately." I took it, the weight of it cold in my palm. "You really think something might happen at a family dinner?" "I think if my uncle wanted to make a move against Lucia, surrounding me with family would be the perfect cover." He adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous gesture I'd never seen before. "I also think he's been suspiciously eager to meet her. Maybe he just wants to see his great niece. Maybe." But Dante didn't sound convinced. Or maybe he wants to see what all the fuss is about before deciding whether she's worth keeping alive. The casual brutality of it made my stomach turn. And if he decides she's not, then I make sure he never gets the chance to act on that decision. Dante's voice went cold. One way or another, the dinner was held at another brownstone in Society Hill, this one older, more ostentatious, dripping with old-world money. We arrived at 7, and I carried Lucia while Dante guided me through a maze of rooms filled with antiques and relatives. They all stared. I'd expected curiosity, maybe some judgment, but the looks I got were assessing in a way that made my skin crawl, like they were calculating my worth, my threat level, my proximity to Dante. His uncle, Salvatore, sat at the head of a dining table that could have seated 30. He was in his 70s, white-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. When we entered, his gaze went immediately to Lucia. "So this is Carlo's bastard," he said. Dante went rigid beside me. "Her name is Lucia." "Of course." Salvatore waved a hand. "Bring her here. Let me see." I glanced at Dante, who nodded slightly. I approached the old man with Lucia in my arms, hyper-aware of every eye tracking my movement. Salvatore studied Lucia with an intensity that made me want to shield her. "She has the Accardi chin," he said finally, "and Carlo's eyes. But the mother?" "Was no one," Dante said flatly. "A fling. Careless." Salvatore's gaze shifted to me. "And who are you?" "Sienna Hayes. The nanny. American?" He made it sound like a disease. "Yes, sir." "And how did my nephew find you?" I opened my mouth, but Dante answered. "She has experience with children. That's all that matters." Salvatore's eyes moved between us, and something calculating flickered there. "Is it?" He turned to the rest of the table, maybe a dozen people, all family, all watching. "Well, let's eat. We can discuss business after." The dinner was brutal, not in any dramatic way, but in the constant, subtle warfare happening beneath polite conversation. Questions that weren't really questions, implications wrapped in compliments, and through it all, Salvatore watched Lucia like she was a puzzle he was solving piece by piece. I sat beside Dante, barely touching my food, keeping Lucia quiet through some miracle of exhaustion and careful timing. Dante ate mechanically, his whole body radiating tension. When Lucia started fussing halfway through the main course, I excused myself and found a small library to feed her. I was settling into a leather chair when the door opened. Not Dante. A younger man, maybe 40, expensive suit, cold smile. "The nanny," he said. "I'm Nico. Salvatore's son. Nice to meet you." "Is it?" He closed the door behind him, and alarm bells started ringing. "I'm curious about something." "What's that?" "Why Dante is so protective of you." Nico moved closer, and I stood instinctively, keeping the chair between us. "You're just hired help, yes? But he watches you like you're something precious." "I'm taking care of his niece." "Are you?" His smile widened. "Or are you taking care of him?" "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" The mysterious woman who appears from nowhere. The baby who may or may not be family. My cousin acting like he's guarding the crown jewels. Nico's expression hardened. "Things are changing in this family. Power is shifting, and people who aren't careful get crushed." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice." He straightened his jacket. "From someone who'd hate to see a pretty face get damaged." Before I could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Dante, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Get out," he said to Nico. "Just introducing myself to your... What did you call her? The nanny?" Nico's smile was poisonous. "Charming girl. Out, now." Nico left, but not before giving me one last calculating look. Dante closed the door and locked it, then turned to me with barely controlled fury. "Did he touch you?" "No. But he threatened me." I adjusted Lucia, who had gone tense in my arms. "What the hell is happening here?" "My family is happening." Dante dragged a hand through his hair, the first time I'd seen him truly rattled. "They smell blood in the water, and they're circling." "Because of Carlo's death?" "Because of the power vacuum it created. My uncle wants control of the family business. So does Nico. So do half the people in that dining room." He moved closer. "And Lucia represents a claim to legitimacy they don't want to exist. So we're surrounded by people who want her dead." "Yes." His honesty was brutal, which is why we're leaving. Now. He took Lucia from me, grabbed my hand with his free one, and pulled me toward a side door. We moved through the house quickly, bypassing the dining room, until we reached the front entrance. Salvatore was waiting there. "Leaving so soon?" The old man smiled. "How rude." "Family emergency," Dante said coolly. "Of course." Salvatore's eyes glinted. "You know, I had my own DNA test done on the child, from the glass she drank from at the table." My blood went cold. Dante's grip on my hand tightened. "And?" Dante's voice was ice. "Results tomorrow." Salvatore's smile widened. "I'm very curious to see if they match yours." We left then, with that threat hanging in the air like smoke. In the car, Dante drove in silence, while Lucia slept in her seat, and I tried to process what had just happened. "He doesn't think she's Carlo's," I said finally. "No." Dante's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "He thinks she's mine." The house felt different when we returned, smaller somehow, despite its size. Dante disappeared into his study without a word, leaving me to settle Lucia in her bassinet and try to quiet the panic rising in my chest. Salvatore thought Lucia was Dante's daughter, which meant he thought I was what? A mistress. A secret girlfriend. Something that would make Dante vulnerable, exposed. I'd just stripped out of the blue dress and into my usual clothes when my door opened. I spun around, but it was only Mrs. Chen with tea. "Mr. Accardi asked me to bring this to you," she said, setting the tray down. "He said you might have trouble sleeping. Is he always like this? The uncle?" Mrs. Chen's expression tightened. Salvatore is ambitious, and ambitious men are dangerous when they feel threatened. What's he threatened by? Change. She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I've worked for this family for 20 years. Carlo was kind, Dante is careful, but Salvatore?" She shook her head. "Salvatore is hungry." After she left, I drank the tea and watched Lucia sleep. At some point, exhaustion won, and I dozed in the chair beside her bassinet. I woke to Dante standing in my doorway. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to wake you. What time is it?" 3 a.m. He looked rumpled, jacket gone, shirt untucked, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. I wanted to check on her. "She's fine. Fed at midnight, changed at 2. I stood, stretching muscles gone stiff. "Are you okay?" "No." The honesty surprised me, but I'm functional. We stood there in the darkness, Lucia sleeping between us, and something shifted. Dante moved closer, and I could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "Thank you," he said. "For tonight, for staying calm." I wasn't calm. I was terrified. "You hid it well." A ghost of a smile. "Better than I did." "What happens when your uncle gets his DNA results?" "He'll know the truth." Dante's voice was rough. "That Lucia isn't mine. That Carlo was her father. Will that be enough? For him? No." He dragged a hand through his hair. "He'll spin some story about paternity fraud or illegitimacy. Find a reason to contest her place in the family. So what do we do?" He focused on me fully. "You're still planning to leave after the week." I should have confirmed it. Should have reminded him this was temporary. But looking at Lucia, and at Dante's exhausted, desperate face, I couldn't. "That depends," I said. "Are you going to protect her?" "With my life." "Then I'm not going anywhere." The words came out before I could stop them. "Not until she's safe." Something changed in Dante's expression. Gratitude, maybe, or relief. He moved closer, and suddenly we were just inches apart, with Lucia sleeping behind me and the whole dangerous world outside. "Sienna," he said my name like a warning. "You don't know what you're signing up for. Then tell me." "My family kills people who become inconvenient. My business operates in shadows. My life is violence wrapped in expensive suits." His voice dropped. "And you're, what? Tell me what I am." "Innocent." The word came out harsh. "You're innocent, and you don't belong in this world, and every instinct I have is telling me to send you away before you get hurt. But you won't." "No." His jaw worked. "Because I'm selfish enough to keep you here." The air between us felt electric, dangerous. I should have stepped back, should have created distance, but I didn't. "Why did you really bring me here?" I asked. "The truth. Because Lucia needed you. And because..." He stopped, something warring in his expression. "Because when I watched you hold her that night in the diner, I thought maybe there was still something good left in the world, something I hadn't destroyed yet." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in my chest. Without thinking, I reached up and touched his face, just my fingertips against his jaw. He went absolutely still. "You're not as destroyed as you think," I whispered. "Don't." But he didn't pull away. "Don't see good in me, Sienna. It's not there." "Liar." Something broke then. Dante's hand came up to cover mine, pressing my palm against his face. His eyes closed, and I felt the tension radiating through him, control barely maintained. "This is a mistake," he said. "Probably. You should go. Back to your life. Your safety." I should. But I didn't move. His eyes opened, and the heat in them made my breath catch. "Sienna." Lucia made a small sound, and we both froze. She stirred in her bassinet, whimpering, and the moment shattered. Dante stepped back as I turned to her, lifting her before she could fully wake. "I should let you rest," Dante said, his voice rough. "Dante, we have the DNA results tomorrow. We'll deal with everything after that." He was already moving toward the door, retreating behind walls I'd briefly seen crack. "Good night." He left, and I stood there with Lucia in my arms, my hand still tingling from the warmth of his skin, wondering what the hell I'd just done. The DNA results arrived at 2 p.m. The next day, Dante opened the envelope in his study with me and Lucia present. His hands were steady, his face unreadable. He read the document once, twice, then set it down carefully. "Well?" I asked. "Lucia is Carlo's," he said it flatly. 99.9% certainty. I should have felt relief. Should have felt something lighter. But Dante's expression was storm clouds. "What?" I pressed. "There's a note attached. From the lab." He handed me a second page. They ran additional markers. Extended family analysis. I read it, and my blood went cold. The note explained that while Lucia was definitely Carlo's daughter, the genetic markers also showed something else. A familial connection to Dante that was too close to be uncle-niece. "I don't understand," I said. "It means Carlo and I shared more DNA than we should have." Dante's voice was deadly quiet. "It means my father wasn't who we thought he was. Or Carlo's father wasn't. Or," he stopped, jaw working, "it means someone in my family has been lying for decades. Who else knows about this? Just us. And the lab." He pulled out his phone. "The lab that just received a very generous payment to lose these results. Dante, this doesn't leave this room." His eyes met mine, and they were absolutely merciless. "If my uncle finds out there's any question about Carlo's paternity about the family line, he'll use it to destroy everything, including Lucia. So what do? We bury it." He picked up the results and moved to the fireplace, feeding the pages to the flames. "And we make sure Salvatore's test confirms exactly what we want him to see. Can you do that?" "I can do a lot of things." The paper curled and burned, secrets turning to ash. Most of them are probably illegal. He watched until every page was destroyed, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "You should still leave," he said. "While you can." "No. Sienna." I said no. I adjusted Lucia, who was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the bomb that had just detonated. "Whatever this is, whatever secrets your family has, Lucia doesn't deserve to pay for them. And neither do you. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. Maybe not." I met his eyes. But I know enough. For a moment, Dante just looked at me. Really looked, like he was trying to memorize something he knew he'd lose. Then he nodded once, sharp, and the walls went back up. "Then we go to war," he said. "And God help us both." Salvatore's DNA results came back the next morning, delivered by courier in a sealed envelope. Dante opened it at the breakfast table, while I fed Lucia and pretended my hands weren't shaking. "Well?" I asked when he'd read it twice. "It confirms Carlo as the father." His expression gave nothing away. My uncle got exactly what he was looking for, which is proof that Lucia is legitimate. He set the envelope down carefully, which means now he has to decide whether to accept her into the family or find another reason to eliminate her. "You're saying even with proof, she's still in danger." "I'm saying proof just changes the game, not the stakes." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "I have a meeting with Salvatore this afternoon. He wants to discuss Lucia's future. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. She's safer with me than with anyone else in this house. You said so yourself." I lifted Lucia against my shoulder. "And if he's meeting you to discuss her future, she should be there." Dante's jaw tightened. "This isn't a negotiation." "You're right, it's not." I stood, meeting his eyes. "Because I'm not asking permission." For a long moment, we stared at each other, a battle of wills fought in silence. Then, surprisingly, Dante smiled. It was small, almost hidden, but real. "Fine," he said. "But you stay quiet. Stay close. And if I tell you to leave, you leave. Understood?" "Understood." The meeting was at a private club in Rittenhouse Square, old wood, leather chairs, the smell of cigars, and money. We were led to a back room where Salvatore waited with Nico and 2 other men I didn't recognize. "Dante," Salvatore gestured to the chairs across from him. "And the girl, how domestic." I sat beside Dante, keeping Lucia tucked against me. She was awake but calm, her gray eyes taking in the room with infant seriousness. "You wanted to discuss Lucia," Dante said. "So discuss. Always so direct." Salvatore lit a cigar, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. "Very well. The DNA confirms she's Carlo's daughter, which makes her an Accardi, which means she has a claim. To what? That depends. Salvatore's eyes glinted. Carlo's estate was not insignificant. His share of the family business, his properties, all of it would naturally go to his daughter, held in trust until she's of age, Dante said. Standard arrangement. With you as trustee, I assume? Nico leaned forward. How convenient. Would you prefer someone else manage a child's inheritance? Dante's voice went cold. Perhaps someone who's already tried to have her killed? The room went silent. Salvatore's expression didn't change, but something flickered in Nico's eyes, guilt, maybe, or surprise. That's quite an accusation, Salvatore said softly. Is it? Dante pulled out his phone, pressed a button. A recording played audio only, but clear enough. Two men discussing an accident that needed to happen. A woman and child who needed to be removed from the board. The voices were distorted, but the implication was crystal clear. Where did you get that? Nico demanded. Carlo kept insurance. Dante's smile was sharp as broken glass. He knew someone in the family wanted him dead. He just didn't know who until it was too late. Salvatore set down his cigar very carefully. And you think it was us? I think it was someone with a lot to gain from my brother's death. Someone who saw a power vacuum and decided to fill it. Dante leaned forward. But here's the thing, Uncle. I have copies of this recording. Multiple copies. If anything happens to me, or to Lucia, or to anyone I care about, it all gets released. To the police, to the families, to everyone. You're bluffing. Try me. The tension in the room was suffocating. Lucia made a small sound, and I rocked her gently, trying to look anywhere but at the men who might be planning our deaths. You've become bold, Salvatore said finally. Reckless, even. I learned from the best. Dante stood. Lucia is under my protection. She will receive her inheritance when the time comes, and if anyone in this family, anyone makes a move against her, I will burn it all down. Even if it destroys you, especially if it destroys me. Dante's voice was quiet, deadly, because I have nothing left to lose. He turned to leave, and I started to follow, but Salvatore's voice stopped us. The girl, he said. The nanny. What's her name again? Every instinct screamed danger. Dante moved slightly, positioning himself between me and his uncle. Her name is none of your concern, Dante said. Isn't it? Salvatore smiled. She's living in your house, caring for your niece. One might think she's more than just hired help. One would be wrong. Would they? Salvatore's eyes moved to me. Tell me, dear, what do you think of my nephew? Do you find him protective? I think he cares about his niece, I said, keeping my voice steady. That's all. That's all. Salvatore nodded slowly. How disappointing. I'd hoped for something more interesting. Dante's hand found mine, a brief touch, a warning. We're done here. This time, we left. No one stopped us. In the car, neither of us spoke until we were miles away. Lucia had fallen asleep, exhausted by the tension she couldn't possibly understand. That recording, I said finally. Did Carlo really leave it? No. Dante's hands were tight on the steering wheel. I had it fabricated yesterday, based on intelligence about the men my uncle uses for dirty work. So you're bluffing? Completely. He glanced at me, but Salvatore doesn't know that, and the fear of exposure will keep him quiet. For now. For now. I repeated the words, tasting the impermanence. What happens when he calls your bluff? Then we run. Or we fight. Dante's voice was flat. Probably both. We drove in silence for another few minutes, before I asked the question burning in my chest. Why did you hold my hand back there? To keep you calm. Liar. His jaw worked. Because if they saw you as expendable, they'd use you against me. But if they saw you as important as someone I'd protect, they'd think twice. So it was strategy. Yes. But the way he said it suggested that wasn't the whole truth. I looked at our reflection in the window, me holding Lucia, Dante driving, the three of us wrapped in a cocoon of glass and metal. We looked like a family. We weren't, but in the soft light, with danger outside and fragile safety within, it was easy to pretend. When this is over, I said quietly, when Lucia is safe, what happens to me? Dante was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely above a whisper, I don't know, but I hope you're smart enough to leave. And if I'm not? His hands tightened on the wheel. Then God help us both. It happened 3 days later, at 2 a.m. I woke to the sound of breaking glass distant, downstairs, followed by shouts. Lucia started crying immediately, sensing the fear that flooded the house like water. I grabbed her from the bassinet, grabbed the panic button Dante had given me, and pressed it twice. Then I locked my bedroom door and waited. The shouting grew louder, gunshots sharp, unmistakable, more shouting, running footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Someone tried the doorknob. Sienna. Dante's voice, rough and urgent. Open the door. I did. He stood there in dark clothes, blood on his shirt, not his, I realized with nauseating relief. Behind him, the hallway was chaos. 2 security guards flanking him, weapons drawn. We need to move, Dante said. Now. What's happening? Salvatore sent men. They got past the perimeter. He took Lucia from me, tucking her against his chest with one arm while keeping a gun in his other hand. We're going to the safe room. Stay between the guards. Don't stop for anything. We moved through the house like a military operation, fast, controlled, terrifying. I caught glimpses of destruction. Overturned furniture, bullet holes in walls, a body in a black suit that I forced myself not to look at. The safe room was behind a panel in Dante's study, steel reinforced, equipped with communications equipment and supplies. Once inside, he sealed the door, and the silence that followed was deafening. Are they still out there? I asked. For now. Dante set Lucia down in a portable crib someone had thought to stock. But security is handling it. Handling it. I repeated the words, hands shaking. You mean killing them? Yes. He didn't sugarcoat it. That's exactly what I mean. I sank onto a bench, adrenaline crashing through my system. Lucia was crying again, and I reached for her automatically, pulling her against me and rocking. Dante paced the small space like a caged animal, gun still in hand, blood still on his shirt. He looked feral, dangerous, nothing like the controlled man who drank espresso at breakfast. This is my fault, he said finally. I miscalculated. I thought the recording would be enough to keep Salvatore in check. It wasn't your fault. It was. He turned to me, and there was fury in his eyes. I brought you into this. I put you and Lucia in danger because I was too arrogant to see the move he was making. What move? This was never about Lucia's legitimacy. He laughed, harsh and bitter. It was about forcing me to show my hand, to prove that I'd protect her. And you, the weight of that landed on me. He sent those men to see what you'd do, and now he knows. Dante's voice went quiet, deadly. Now he knows exactly how far I'll go. We sat in the safe room for 2 hours. Eventually, one of the security guards came to tell us the house was clear. 4 of Salvatore's men dead. 1 captured, no casualties on our side. Dante's expression didn't change. The prisoner? In the basement, sir. Good. He handed me the gun. I took it with numb fingers and headed for the door. Stay here. Where are you going? To have a conversation. I understood what that meant. What would happen in that basement. And I understood, with sudden clarity, exactly what Dante was capable of. Don't, I said. He paused, hand on the door. Don't what? Don't do something you can't take back. I've already done that. His gray eyes were empty. The moment I decided to protect her, I crossed every line that mattered. Dante, I'll be back in an hour. Keep Lucia safe. He left before I could argue. He returned 90 minutes later, blood on his hands. Literal blood washed most of the way off, but traces remained around his knuckles and under his nails. I'd gotten Lucia back to sleep and was sitting in his study, gun still in my lap. When he walked in, he moved to the bar cart, poured 3 fingers of whiskey, downed it. Did you kill him? I asked. No. Dante poured another drink, but he'll wish I had. What did you find out? Salvatore's endgame. He turned to face me, and exhaustion carved lines into his face. He wants me to give up Lucia, voluntarily, sign over her inheritance, remove her from the family, let her disappear into the system. Why? Because she's leverage. As long as she exists, I have a claim to Carlo's empire, a reason to fight for control. Dante set down his glass. Without her, I'm just another soldier, dispensable. So this was all about power. It's always about power. He moved closer, sitting beside me on the couch. And I won't give her up, even if it costs me everything. Even if it costs me everything? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Dante went very still. What? Those men came here tonight because of Lucia. And me. Because Salvatore thinks I matter to you. I turned to face him fully. Does he? Does he what? Does he think correctly? Do I matter? The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. Dante's jaw worked, and I saw him weighing truth against strategy, vulnerability against control. Yes, he said finally. You matter. Why? Because. He stopped, dragged a hand through his hair. Because you walked into my life at 3 a.m. and made a crying baby stop. Because you stayed when any sane person would have run. Because you look at me like I'm still human, even when I'm covered in blood. His voice cracked on the last word, and something in my chest broke open. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, the one with blood still under the nails. You are human, I said, even when you're covered in blood. Sienna, don't what, tell you the truth? I held his hand tighter. You're not a monster, Dante. You're a man trying to protect his family in a world that doesn't play fair. You're making me better than I am. I'm seeing you clearly. I reached up with my free hand, touching his face. And you're terrified I'll stop. His eyes closed, and he leaned into my touch like a man starving. You should be afraid of me. I know. You should leave. Tonight. While you can. I know that too. I moved closer, until our faces were inches apart. But I'm not going anywhere. Why? The word was barely a whisper. Because Lucia needs me. Because you need me. Because... I stopped, realizing the truth as I spoke it. Because I need this. Need to matter to someone. Need to be more than just invisible. Something in Dante broke then. He surged forward, and his mouth found mine desperate, rough, tasting of whiskey and violence, and something sweeter underneath. I kissed him back just as hard, threading my fingers through his hair, pulling him closer. We broke apart, gasping, foreheads pressed together. This is a mistake, Dante said. Probably. You'll get hurt. I'm already hurt. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. We all are. His thumb traced my jaw, gentle, despite the blood still under his nails. I don't know how to protect you, and want you at the same time. Then don't protect me. I kissed him again, softer this time. Just want me. We stayed like that for a long moment, tangled together on his couch, Lucia sleeping in the next room, blood and danger, and something fragile growing between us. Outside, dawn was breaking. Inside, everything was about to get infinitely more complicated. The house went into lockdown after the attack. No one in or out without Dante's explicit approval. Guards doubled, every window reinforced. We became prisoners in luxury, waiting for Salvatore's next move. It came 3 days later, not with violence, but with an invitation. Dante read it at breakfast, his expression unreadable. He wants to meet. Neutral ground. Just the two of us. It's a trap, I said immediately. Of course it's a trap. He set down the letter. But it's also an opportunity. For what? For him to kill you? For me to end this? Dante met my eyes. One way or another. The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I understood what he was saying, that he planned to kill his uncle, or die trying. No, I said. There has to be another way. There isn't. He stood, moving to the window. Salvatore won't stop. As long as he sees Lucia and you as leverage, we're all in danger. I need to remove the threat. By committing murder. By protecting my family. He turned back to me. This is who I am, Sienna. This is what my world requires. Then change your world. It's not that simple. It could be. I stood too, closing the distance between us. You could take Lucia and disappear. Start over. Somewhere far from here. From all of this. And leave the family business to Salvatore? Let him win? Who cares who wins? My voice rose. Lucia deserves better than growing up in this violence. So do you. Dante's expression softened, and he reached up to touch my face. And you? What do you deserve? I don't know anymore. The honesty felt like exposure. 3 weeks ago, I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted. Now I'm in love with a man who keeps blood under his fingernails, and a baby who isn't mine, and a life that could end any second. The words hung between us. In love. I'd said it without meaning to. Without preparation. Dante went very still. What did you say? You heard me. Sienna, don't. I stepped back, needing distance. Don't tell me it's a mistake, or that I don't know what I'm saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. You're in love with an idea of me, not who I actually am. Stop telling me what I feel. My voice cracked. I see you, Dante. All of you. The violence, the control, the way you carry guilt like armor. I see it, and I love you anyway. He looked at me like I'd stabbed him. You shouldn't. Well, I do. I grabbed Lucia's bottle from the counter, needing something to do with my hands, and you can either accept that or push me away, but you don't get to tell me I'm wrong. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, I almost missed it. I've never let myself want something I can't control. What does that mean? It means, he moved closer, and his eyes were raw, exposed. It means I've been in love with you since that first night in the diner. Since I watched you gentle my brother's daughter like it was the most natural thing in the world. And it terrifies me. My breath caught. Why? Because everyone I love dies. The words were stark, brutal. My mother, Carlo, even Lucia's mother, who I barely knew but was carrying my brother's child. Everyone. I'm not dead yet. Not yet. He touched my face again, thumb tracing my cheekbone. But if Salvatore knows how I feel about you, he already does, I interrupted. He figured it out at that dinner. That's why this is happening now, isn't it? He's forcing your hand, Dante nodded slowly. If I go to this meeting, one of us dies, me or him. Either way, Lucia loses protection. Not if I'm here. You can't protect her alone. Not against my family. Then don't go alone. I grabbed his hands. Take your guards. Take an army. Just don't walk into a trap thinking you have to sacrifice yourself. And if sacrifice is the only way to keep you both safe, then you're an idiot. The words came out harsh. Because sacrificing yourself doesn't keep us safe. It just means we lose you. Something in Dante's expression cracked. He pulled me against him, hard, his arms wrapping around me like he could physically hold all the broken pieces together. I don't know how to do this, he whispered against my hair. How to love you and keep you alive at the same time. You figure it out, we figure it out. I pulled back to look at him. Together, for a moment, I thought he'd argue. But instead, he kissed me deep, desperate, a drowning man finding air. I kissed him back, pouring everything into it. Fear, love, the stubborn insistence that we could survive this. When we broke apart, Dante's phone was ringing. He answered, listened, then hung up with an expression I couldn't read. What? I asked. Salvatore moved up the meeting. Tonight. 8 p.m. He looked at me. He says if I don't come alone, he'll send men here. For you and Lucia. My blood went cold. So your choices are death or death. Those have always been my choices. But he smiled small, sad. I just had less to lose before. At 7:30, Dante dressed for the meeting in all black. He checked his weapon 3 times, kissed Lucia's forehead, and turned to me. There's a car waiting. Driver you can trust. If anything happens, Mrs. Chen knows where to take you. New identities, new city, everything arranged. Dante, promise me. His gray eyes were fierce. Promise me you'll run if this goes wrong. I'm not promising that. Sienna, if you die, I'm not running. I'm finishing this. I held his face between my hands. So you better not die. He laughed broken, beautiful. You're going to get yourself killed. Then we'll die together. Very romantic. This isn't funny. I know. I kissed him, soft and slow. I love you. Come back to me. I love you too. He said it like a confession, like absolution. I'm sorry I'm not better at this. You're perfect at it. I stepped back before I could stop him. Now go. And don't do anything stupid. He left, and I stood in the doorway watching his car disappear into the night, carrying the man I loved toward violence I couldn't prevent. The call came at 9:15, not from Dante. From Salvatore. Miss Hayes, he said when I answered. I have something that belongs to you. My heart stopped. What? Your employer, my nephew. He's alive, if that's what you're wondering. A pause. For now, what do you want? What I've always wanted. Lucia, her inheritance, her removal from the family line. His voice was smooth, controlled. You bring her to me, Dante lives. You refuse, and I kill him slowly while you listen. You're lying. He wouldn't let you take him alive. He didn't have much choice after I mentioned that I have men watching this house. Watching you. Salvatore's smile was audible. He surrendered to save you, Miss Hayes. How touching. The floor seemed to tilt. Let me talk to him. Certainly. Rustling. Then Dante's voice strained, furious. Don't do it. Don't bring her. He'll kill us all anyway. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, Lucia sleeping in my arms, and understood with absolute clarity what I had to do. I called the one person I knew would help without asking questions. "Mrs. Chen, how much do you know?" I asked when she appeared at my door. "Enough." Her expression was grave. "What do you need?" "Everything you know about the meeting location, guard positions, Salvatore's security, everything." She didn't hesitate. 20 minutes later, I had a layout of the warehouse where Salvatore was holding Dante, guard rotations, blind spots in their surveillance. Mrs. Chen had been with this family for 20 years. She knew things. "You can't go alone," she said. "It's suicide. I'm not going alone." I pulled out my phone, called the number for Dante's head of security. "I'm going with an army." The plan was insane. Probably suicidal. But it was the only chance we had. Dante's security team's 6 men who'd protected the Accardi family for years agreed immediately. They'd been waiting for authorization to move. I gave it. "Salvatore thinks I'm bringing Lucia," I told them. "We're going to let him believe that until the last possible second." I dressed Lucia in her warmest clothes, strapped her into her carrier, and carried a bag that looked like a diaper bag but contained something very different: the fabricated recording Dante had used to threaten Salvatore, along with documentation of every illegal transaction the old man had made in the past decade. Dante had kept insurance. Now I was using it. We arrived at the warehouse at 11 p.m. I went in through the front door alone, as instructed, carrying Lucia. The security team flanked the building, waiting for my signal. Salvatore stood in the center of the space, lit by harsh overhead lights. Dante was on his knees beside him, hands bound, bleeding from a cut above his eye. "Miss Hayes." Salvatore smiled. "How prompt." I brought her. I held up Lucia, who was miraculously still sleeping. "Like you asked." "And the paperwork? Relinquishing her claim?" "Right here." I set down the bag, pulled out documents. Everything signed, notarized, legal. Salvatore's eyes gleamed. "Show me." I moved closer, and Dante's eyes tracked me with desperate fury. I could see him silently begging me to run, to leave him. I ignored him. "Here." I held out the papers. Lucia's inheritance signed over to the family trust. Her legal identity removed from all Accardi records. She disappears from your world completely. Salvatore took the papers, scanning them. "And what guarantee do I have that you won't go to the authorities?" "What would I tell them? I'm a nanny who got involved in a family dispute. I have no proof, no standing." I adjusted Lucia carefully. "I just want to leave. With Dante, that was the deal." "Was it?" Salvatore looked at me, and I saw calculation in his eyes. "I'm wondering why you'd risk so much for a man like my nephew. He's a killer, you know. Violent. Dangerous. I know what he is. And you love him anyway?" Salvatore laughed. "How disappointing. I'd hoped for more sense from you. We don't choose who we love." I met his eyes steadily. "We just choose what we're willing to sacrifice for them." "Indeed." Salvatore handed the papers to one of his guards. "Kill them both." "And the baby?" I smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." I pressed the button on Lucia's carrier, not a diaper bag fastener, but a detonator for the flashbangs Dante's security team had planted around the warehouse perimeter. Light and sound exploded simultaneously. In the chaos, I dropped to the ground, shielding Lucia. Gunfire erupted Dante's team, pouring through doors and windows, engaging Salvatore's guards with brutal efficiency. Through the noise, I heard Dante shouting my name. I crawled toward him, pulled the knife from my boot. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," and cut his restraints. "Are you insane?" he demanded, grabbing me and Lucia both. "Probably." I handed him the gun I'd tucked into Lucia's carrier. "Now get us out of here." We moved through the firefight like shadows, Dante shooting anyone who got close, me clutching Lucia and praying she'd sleep through the violence. We reached a side door, burst into the night, and found 2 security guards waiting with a car. "Go!" one of them shouted. We went. Behind us, the warehouse lit up with more gunfire. I didn't look back, just held Lucia and Dante's hand as we sped away from everything he'd known towards something we'd have to build from nothing. The FBI showed up at Salvatore's warehouse 30 minutes later. Anonymous tip. Documentation of 20 years of illegal activity. Recordings, some real, most fabricated, of enough crimes to bury the old man for life. Dante had set it up weeks ago. Contingency plans within contingency plans. Just needed the right moment to trigger. That moment was me walking into a trap and trusting him to have my back. 3 weeks later, we sat on the back deck of a house in rural Vermont, watching Lucia try to crawl across a blanket. She'd grown stronger, healthier, with Dante's gray eyes and a smile that could break hearts. Salvatore took a plea deal, Dante said, reading from his phone. 30 years minimum. Nico's facing separate charges. The family is falling apart, I finished. Good. Good? He looked at me, surprised. That was my entire life. My legacy. Your legacy is her. I nodded toward Lucia. Everything else was just a cage. Dante was quiet for a long moment, then set down his phone and pulled me against him. I keep waiting for you to wake up. To realize what you gave up. I gave up a studio apartment and a waitressing job. I gestured at Lucia, at the house, at him. This. Everything. A fugitive life with a former crime lord and a baby? That's your everything? Yes. I kissed him, tasting coffee and morning and the future we were building. Absurd, isn't it? Completely. But he smiled real, unguarded. I love you. I love you too. I rested my head on his shoulder. Even though you're terrible at retirement, I've been retired 3 weeks. Give me time. You organized the entire security system for this house in 2 days. That was just practical. And you've been consulting with your former security team about business opportunities. That was... He stopped, laughed. Okay, fine. I'm terrible at this. We'll work on it. I watched Lucia finally master the crawl, propelling herself forward with determination that was pure Accardi. We have time. Later, after Lucia was asleep and the stars came out over Vermont's mountains, Dante and I sat on that deck and talked about the future. I want more, he said suddenly. More what? This. You, Lucia. He turned to face me fully. I want the whole thing. Marriage. Maybe more children. A life that's normal? I was going to say impossible. But yes, normal. His voice dropped. If you'll have me. I looked at him, this man who'd killed to protect me, who'd sacrificed an empire for a baby, who'd learned to change diapers and make bottles and love without armor. Ask me properly, I said. Dante laughed, then slid off the deck chair and onto one knee. No ring, no plan, just him and me, and the ridiculous audacity of hope. Sienna Hayes. Will you marry a reformed crime lord with a complicated family, and a tendency toward violence when protecting the people he loves? That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's the most honest one you'll get. I pulled him up, kissed him until the stars blurred. Yes, obviously yes. 6 months later, the DNA test that had started everything sat in a drawer, forgotten. It didn't matter anymore whether Lucia was Carlo's or something more complicated. She was ours. Dante had taken up woodworking, of all things. Built Lucia a crib, a high chair, a toy chest. Kept his hands busy with creation instead of destruction. I worked at the local library. Told everyone I was a single mom with a very devoted boyfriend. Close enough to the truth. And at night, when Lucia was asleep and the Vermont quiet pressed in around us, Dante and I would sit on that deck and marvel at the impossible thing we'd built. Do you miss it? I asked one evening. The power, the family, all of it? Sometimes, he admitted. Then Lucia laughs. Or you kiss me. Or I remember that I used to keep blood under my fingernails. He looked at his hands clean now, calloused from carpentry. No, I don't miss it. Good, I curled against him. Because this is better. This is everything. And it was. Imperfect, complicated, built from violence and trauma, and a crying baby who'd brought 2 broken people together in a diner at 3 a.m. But it was ours, and that was enough.